Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Baba Ifa. We're only the strongest roots, see the light, brought to you by Botánica candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please tap that like button and hit that subscribe button. Great episode I've been wanting to do for a long time today. It's on Babalu Aye, right? An Orisha that I've been venerating since I was a young boy in Hialeah. Somebody that is as public as he is obscure. And who's going to help me through this process is Mr. Phil, the podcast doctor.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. This one I don't know much about, so I'll be learning along with a lot of the other people here.
Babalu Aye is an interesting case, man. He has a classic story, and then he has a bunch of different manifestations. So his whole life epic is probably as diverse as anybody could imagine. So,
okay. Well, glad to get into it.
Absolutely.
I want to give a shout out.
Oh, please, to all our members. And if you haven't joined the membership program, come on.
Yeah, what are you waiting for?
Come on.
So I want to do some different music this time, so.
Elevator music.
That's exactly what it is called.
Of course, man.
Elevator
it's in
music.
like every movie.
Yeah, okay, so. Go ahead and join our membership program, guys, if you have not done that yet. But I do want to shout out some of these new members, and these people are our VIP members here.
Oh, thanks, guys.
So a shout out to Eddie Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to 𝘃𝗍𝗿𝗄.
Okay.
Shout out to Ricardo Ferguson.
Thank you.
Shout out to Diana Canellis.
Okay.
Shout out to the Trinidadian goddess.
Oh, my
She's
goddaughter.
very active in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Let's shout out some premier members as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's I can't pronounce this. It's 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗄.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗄. Yeah.
Okay.
Shout out
how
to
do you
the
say that
brother.
again?
𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗄.
Okay.
He's from one of the tribes in Nigeria.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
okay.
he's awesome.
All right. Shout out to Steven Feliciano.
Thank you, Steve.
Shout out to Angel Dust.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Shout out to Philly 1984.
Awesome. Great year.
And shout out to Kenya Hutton.
Oh, man.
So
Thank you, Miss
those are
Kenya.
all our new members.
Kenya.
And again, if you have not joined our membership program, it's very easy. All you have to do is hit that join button that's directly under this video. We got 3 different tiers and 3 different sets of perks you get for each tier.
Gotta love the perks.
All right. So here we go, man.
Oh, Babalu Aye, right? We're going to go ahead and delve into the name. When we say Babalu Aye, we're saying Father of Earth, basically. Babalu Aye, right? But he has another name, which is much more common in Nigeria, which is Obaluaye, which means King of Earth, basically, or King who resides or presides over Earth. And he was just that. Babalu Aye was a king. He was somebody that, was born into royalty in the land of Lukumi or Yoruba land. But before he became king, like fully, where he was recognized and crowned, etc., he was quite a philanderer. He was all over the place. He was a man with a very high libido. He's associated with, certain conditions and diseases because of it. And this story explains that. So he had quite a reputation around town. And his father, Olodumare, or God, said, hey, I understand you're a young man. You're soiling your royal oats, like King 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗀 said. And, that's perfectly fine, but you need to stabilize your life. Prestige is important. I'd like you to elect your first wife, And he was like, of course. But he did not listen. So, partying, being out and about, he met this woman, and he took her home, and they had an entanglement. The thing was, though, is, it was dark, hey, let's go back to my place, things like that. So when he woke up the next morning, he realized the woman had leprosy.
Oh, no.
Yep, she was a leper. But until he had her as nature intended, he didn't see what he needed to see before making that decision. And just like that, he was infected, So here's the thing. When he left the hut, everybody quickly realized, hey, we have an issue. This guy's sick. And what they did is to get rid of him so he wouldn't contaminate everybody else, they threw water at him. Why? Because when the water hits a leper lesion or a lesion of leprosy, it stings. So he basically hobbled his way out and was kicked out of his kingdom. He's wandering, right? He's falling apart. The leprosy's eating away at him. And his brother, 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗂, runs into him on the outskirts of, you know, the village or the kingdom. And he said, bro, what happened to you? He said, man, I was with this chick. I didn't listen. God, you know, dad told me to get a wife, and, you know, I wasn't trying to hint at that, but I got a problem now because I feel like I'm dying. And he says, you look like hell. And he said, well, why don't we go visit Orula, or the Babalawo? And Babalu Aye was kind of skeptical because all he was thinking about was, you know, Project X, you know, partying and women and things like that. So he said, yeah, I think I need some help now. So when he visited Orumila, Babalu Aye walked through the door, and Orula was like, wow, what did you bring me? Like, this guy. He's like, no, this is my brother. He needs help. You know, I'll pay for the reading. Like, just make it happen. So when they perform divination, the Odu Irete Kana is revealed, or Irete Okangrang, where Orumila said that he had to be initiated into Ifa, and he needed to be cleaned with like grains, and he always needed to keep dogs with him. You know, sometimes it was 2, sometimes it was 3, based on the version. But Babalu Aye really didn't have the funds to do any of this. He had literally just went bankrupt. So his brother, 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗲, got together with his comrades, Ogun and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏. They got the funds together. They got the dogs together, the grains. You know, Orumila fronted the initiation, everything. And just like that, it was all good or done. But he was still sick, and he didn't see any changes in his condition, where Orumila said, you have to keep walking now. Babalu Aye said, I don't want to wander anymore. Like, tell me where to go. He said, I can't do that. But whenever you stop walking, that's where you're meant to be. And Babalu Aye was like, good God, look what I just went through for, you know, such a lack of clarity. So he went walking, walked until he couldn't walk no more. And Olodumare saw that he had, you know, fulfilled his obligations. And he, you know, felt bad for his son and realized, you know, this might be the turn of a new leaf, you know, for a better tree. And he sent the divine rains down. And as the rain started falling on him, and as the dogs started licking his lesions, he little by little was getting cured, and he didn't even realize it. So he arrived in a land where people were cheering, paying homage to him, all these different things, and he was kind of spooked. So he said, you know, what's going on? You know, why are you guys, you know, paying homage to me? And they said, we just did a divination where the Odu Irete Kana was revealed, which was the same Odu he came with in Orumila and as Babalawo. And the reading said that the fastest way to success was when the next man with 3 dogs walked into our town to make him king.
No.
And they gave him the name Hazohanu, which means the person with the miraculous medicine, because they were looking at him in a distance and they're like, crap, a leper's coming, you know, get ready. But little by little, as he got closer, he was normal or healed or healthy. And just like that, he became king in the land of Dahomey, or Benin, which is the
woman king.
The woman king, exactly. You know, and they're in Cuba, they're recognized as the Arara, right? Which is actually a name that comes from the drums in that tribe. Because what happened is when the slaves would come over, unfortunately, you know, the slave owners were so ignorant that they didn't take the time to understand the people they had just bought, you know. So what would they do? They would pick a word that was recognizable that the slaves would use interchangeably and just associate that with that group. That's why the Lukumis became the Lukumis, or known as the Lukumis. Some people say Lukumi is a shorter version of Olukumi, which means my friend. And there's another version that says Olukumi means, by the way you're hitting me, you're going to kill me. So because,
those are two very different.
Yeah, so based on dialogue, anthropology, I don't know. I go more with the way you're hitting me is going to kill me. Because Oilukumi means O, I, Lu, you're hitting, Ku, kill, me is me, right? So I go more with that one because it's a little more, you know, tragic. But it's the same thing with the araras. So when they would talk about their drums, they'd be like, rah, rah. So the Cuban slave owner was like, oh, those are the araras. You know what I'm saying? So that's where that came from. Or the 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗃, because, you know, like the people from 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗃, like they became the 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗃𝗍. Like it was very like, you know, it was a low-key insult, but it ultimately became a culture. So he went over there and he became king. You know, they say he married a woman named Nana Buruku, which we have a video about her on the channel. You know, and he married her. He was loyal to her. Some people say he met her on the path, where she was actually the chick that he was with. that he took with her, you know, because at that point all they had was each other. Like,
The one that gave
him the leprosy. It's like, well, we did this, we might as well stay together, right? So they had some friction, they hated each other, you know, and then ultimately they got healed together and became royalty together in another land. The crazy thing about the story is when he arrives over there, he starts hearing the people in his old land where he lived, like the land of Ifa and stuff like that. There was a huge epidemic that actually, you know, befell upon them because of the way they treated him. And 𝘃𝗶𝗸𝗁 sent them a plague. So they started screaming out for his name, you know, Babalu Aye, Babalu Aye. And he went back and saved them for a cost. And they asked him to stay, and he said, no, I have a life somewhere else. But if you ever need me from this point forward, you can go over there and find me. And that's why, you know, Babalu Aye or San Lazaro is such an interesting deity, because he has a manifestation in each one of the clans in Cuba. In the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, they give him a certain way. In the Lukumi, they give him a certain way. In Africa, he has manifestations all over the place. Like, he is the guy. So it's interesting when you see the parallels between Babalu Aye and actually St. Lazarus, right? A guy that resurrected, a guy that walked with the dogs. Like, to be frank with you, I look at a lot of the archetypes of the saints. People like to say that we syncretized with them. I feel like they syncretized with us. Because you look at those kind of parallels and you're like, dude, Ifa was around, I don't know, what was it, 6,000 years before you guys, right? But you're seeing those kind of similarities. What did you get from us? You know? So you see that parallel. And in this sign, it speaks of when Babalu Aye left, like 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗏. Within the shell, there's a number known as 13 or 𝘃𝗏𝗁. It's recognized as the division between the aspect of the 𝘃𝗏𝗿 that pertains to the 𝘃𝗶𝗿𝗏 or shell thrower. And then after 13 and beyond, you know, belongs to the Babalawo. Now, it's not that the brother shell thrower can't manifest an ita or speak about or finish the consultation. He definitely can. Like, if 13 through 16 comes out, you can finish the consultation, do your recommendations, etc. The only stipulation is when that occurs, the shell thrower has to recommend to the client, you need to go visit a Babalawo. Because in that Odu, once he became king, he remembered all of the charity that Orunmila provided him, that his brother 𝗃𝗏𝗏 and his friends provided him. That's why when you get initiated into Babalu Aye, the Babalawo has to be present, and you have to receive, you know, 𝘄cie, which is known as Afra to a certain degree. But the warriors are incorporated in the ceremony. Like, it was a commemoration of, you guys helped me, and I'm going to make sure you're compensated forever. So whenever you're going to receive Babalu Aye, all of these characters play a huge role.
So what are some characteristics of Babalu Aye you see in people?
So what I've noticed with his children, they're very reserved. I remember when I was first getting involved in this spirituality formally, you know, after years of studying, being in the culture, but I never really took the step for initiation, partly because I didn't know what the process was. I actually went to Cuba after receiving my hand of Ifa to receive Olokun, right? And one of the guys that went with me was actually crowning Shango. And one of the guys that was running the ceremony was a son of Babalu Aye crowned directly, which is very rare. Like, some houses actually don't incorporate that. Ours does. And I remember interacting with this gentleman. He was very serious. He wasn't a very tall guy. You know, he was very to the point, but he took a liking to me because, you know, basically whatever he said, I did. You know, I've always been one where if I don't know something, I follow direction. But, you know, very quickly, you know, in his own way, he opened up to me. He talked about his process, the history of his family. He was from Matanzas, which is kind of one of the cradles of the Babalu Aye cult in all of Cuba. You know, so they're very reserved. My brother-in-law is a son of Babalu Aye. He's not crowned, but he's a man of few words as well. You notice that with them. You know, there's like a natural predisposition, you know, very a Keanu Reeves demeanor almost.
Okay.
Like,
you know, I was
reading your mind, Phil.
Is that how that works?
Very reserved. And I think it's because of the fact that he was betrayed. He was somebody that, you know, provided so much to so many people. But when he was at his worst and lowest, there were literally only 4 guys that were willing to help him, maybe with his wife, a 5th person, etc. So you're going to notice with them, there's a lot of reservation. There's a lot of, it takes a while. And it might never stop being socially awkward in that context. Like, they're the type of people where they'll stop right here. And no matter what you do, you might not ever get past that threshold with them.
So they have a lot of walls.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And when you talk about Babalu Aye and his children, the children of Babalu Aye have like this polemic past within Ifa, because for the longest time people said the sons of Babalu Aye could not be initiated as Babalawo. Because they say that when you're a son of Babalu Aye, you're always going to come in trance at some point, whether it's with a spirit or the Orisha. And obviously to become Babalawo, you cannot have any of those characteristics. We as a house, me as a Babalawo, if a child of Babalu Aye comes forward and wants to be initiated as Awo, and he has all the credentials, I'll move forward. I personally don't partake in that, but I can recognize that the child of Babalu Aye has a natural predisposition towards mediumship. And there's various signs that speak about it, whether it's 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗍𝗶𝗍, whether it's 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗂𝗍, you know, where he would divine with the water and the spirituality, or an 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗲 was where, you know, it became taboo to initiate them as Babalaos because they were always coming into trance. You know, we're talking about excellent mediums or excellent Babalaos or Orisha priests. Like the guy that I interacted with in Cuba that one time, he was an Oriate, or the master Orisha of the room. You know what I'm saying? They worked as a group. It was him and two other gentlemen, but he was a master at sacrificing. Mm-hmm. He was a beast with the knife. Other characteristics, I mean, as far as Babalu Aye, we're talking about somebody that really isn't associated with happiness, right? When you look at and this actually, because we're going to be coming out with an 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗍.
Is that because they've gone through a lot of trauma?
That as well. And apart from that, Obaluaye is the Orisha of sickness. You know, he is the patron Orisha of whatever horrible disease is going on at any given moment.
I'm going to see if my knowledge works here.
Dale.
So excuse me if I'm wrong, but was there a pataki? Was it Babalu Aye? Was in the water and 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃 helped him?
Yes, sir. You're killing it, Phil. We're waiting for you, man. Yeah, I think that's a great one to bring up here, because once again, you're going to see with him, there's various versions of his sickness story, and we'll kind of bring full circle with the sickness concept, but that was just it. Babalu Aye had just gotten punished, that whole backstory. Mm-hmm. But this sign says things went a little differently. You know, there's plenty of avatars of how things happen after the base backstory. So in one case, he arrived at the beach. He was about to die. He fell in the water. 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃 cleansed him, and he was cured. He fell in love with her for saving his life, and they began a relationship. So the houses that don't crown Babalu Aye directly came up with the interpretation of crowning 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃, and Babalu Aye is your father, right? We personally don't incorporate this because we feel that it isn't taboo to crown him on the head. A lot of people do because they say he embodies sickness, and you can't crown somebody with sickness incarnate. So we don't interpret it that fervently, but he is associated with whatever the most horrible disease is at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. And at this case, it was COVID about a year ago. But before then, it was HIV. Before then, it was Ebola. Before then, it was any disease that was terminal, cancer. He's with everything because that's how he punishes, you know? So it speaks of that. But when we're talking about him, he is associated with sickness to the point where he's actually like repudiated, you know, where he's not really accepted. Forgive me.
That's interesting though. So what about, you mentioned cancer though?
Everything that's horrible, any sickness, whatever. That's why he is associated with the healing of everything as well. Because in the Odu of Odi Meji was where Babalu Aye was 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃's brother. And 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃 was really well loved within the village. Children, every time they would see him, they would rejoice, they would lose it for him. But they hated Babalu Aye because he was like old and crabby and he was just unhappy all the time.
Curmudgeon old man.
Yeah, he was crotchety. You know what I'm saying? So one day Babalu Aye became jealous and killed his brother. And he hid the body. So 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃, who was the mother in this story, tells her son Shango to go look for, you know, his brother 𝗃𝗍𝗍 or 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃. And when he found the body, he saw Babalu Aye kind of hovering over it. He said, bro, what's going on? He said, no, I killed him because, you know, he thought he was better than me. And he said, it's not that he thought he was better than you, brother. It's just that you're intolerable. You're always miserable. You don't take care of your health. You're a drunk. Like, you are the worst expression of existence. and 𝗀𝗄𝗃 went to kill him, but Babalu Aye ran away. So that's why in Odimeji, Babalu Aye is associated with the tears or the screams of children, because he would mistreat children or make them sick because he wanted somebody else to feel his pain. So what happens in Nigeria is that when a child gets sick, they rub red palm oil over him, like to lower fever and things like that, and to keep away the influence of Babalu Aye, because Babalu Aye would rub red palm oil on his sores to kind of create like a lubricant or a barrier, a membrane between it and nature. You know what I'm saying?
So let's get real here for a second. Like the way you've been describing Babalu Aye, it doesn't sound like it's somebody that I'd want to be associated with.
Yeah, he's not real heroic.
So if you get, see now I'm forgetting here, but if he shows up for you, what do you do? What do you feel like? Oh, this is the one I was hoping for.
Yeah, you learn how to interact with that energy, because you don't get to choose your parents. You are who you are, right? But the most important thing when you get identified as this Orisha is understanding how to counteract all of the negativity that it comes with. It's not negativity, it's more obstacles, right? Because Ochung has very negative aspects. 𝗀𝗄𝗃 has very negative aspects. It's just with Babalu Aye, he's associated with negative aspects that really hit hard for us. You know, children being uncomfortable or sick, sickness in general. I mean, if you look at the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁 or 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁, it was when Babalu Aye was king of the world, right? And his father was 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗄𝗏. You know, he's constantly seen as the son of God. And one day, 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗄𝗏 and the devil are actually having a conversation, and the devil says, I can corrupt anybody on earth. And God said, you can't corrupt my son, Babalu Aye. No way. And he said, give me 3 tries. If I win, earth is mine. If not, I'll disappear into the cosmos. You know what I'm saying? And he said, all right, you got a deal. So what did the devil do? He started making Babalu Aye's life miserable. And he took away 3 things. The first thing he took away was Babalu Aye's money. So Babalu Aye was used to living a very luxurious lifestyle. Like when you look at how he's manifested even in Nigeria and the New World, you see like these velvet robes and, you know, he's dressed very elegantly and things like that. He wasn't used to being poor, you know. The poverty came later with this sign. So, but he lost his money. He was like, whatever, you know, you make money back. You know, money comes and goes, but time is what matters. So he continued, and the devil said, all right, strike one, you know. But then the devil took away his family, you know. And Babalu Aye, when he lost his wife and his children and things like that, like it really hit home for him, because he's like, now I'm broke, now I'm alone, you know. And he kind of looked at the sky. He's like, you know, why are all these things negative? Why are all these negative things happening to me if I'm the son of man ultimately? And but he kept it trucking. He said, this is life, you know. So God looked at the devil and said, well, you got 1 shot left. He said, I'm going to get him this time. You watch. And the devil took away his health. He made him sick, gave him the leprosy, right? Or whatever you want to interpret it as. And this really sent Babalu Aye in a downward spiral. Like, he just didn't talk. He wandered in the desert. That's why when you see him over there, he kind of looks Arabic. Like, have you seen the movie The Mummy?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when Imhotep is walking through Cairo and he's covered in the black robes?
Mm-hmm.
That's Babalu Aye.
Okay.
If you notice when he opens his mouth and he lets the plague out,
yeah,
that's Babalu Aye. And he was wandering. And he just kept looking at the sky, pondering things. He wanted to flip out. He wanted to curse. He wanted to do all these things. But he just meditated and meditated. And then after, you know, however many days in solitude, he looked at the sky and he said, if this is what you want from me, this is what I want for me. And God looked at the devil and said, you lose. He said, man, you really got one there. Take care of him. And the devil left. You know, and God opened up the sky and told Babalu Aye what was happening. He rewarded him for his loyalty. And he said, being that you're the guy that saved the world is yours. You know, so that Odu says, with great power, great responsibility, great obstacles, great resolve. It's saying that this guy was the guy who really showed us that it's better to fight sickness than to lay down and die. Because Baba Ifa says when people get sick, the first thing they want to do is die rather than fight. So Babalu Aye has that resonating message of you don't give up until the last breath.
Have any of the other Orishas have gone through any type of, I guess, hardships than him.
No one has gone through it worse than Babalu Aye.
Yeah.
Not even 𝘃𝗉, because 𝘃𝗉 was so broke that, she cut off her hair, she lost it, she escorted, a bunch of different things. But I think the Orisha, and these are why these Orishas punish so harshly. Like, there was an old saying that, two of the Orishas you never wanted any issues with was Babalu Aye and 𝘃𝗉. Because they went through such hardship, they don't tolerate that kind of weakness. You know what I'm saying? Or that lack of integrity, because they were able to maintain it even through that hardship. So, but no one has ever gone through it worse than Babalu Aye. Not 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍 losing the ear, not 𝘃𝗃𝗃 hanging himself, because unfortunately that 𝗃𝗲𝗍 said, suicide is, as horrible as it is, it's much easier than tolerating whatever it is that we want to kill ourselves over. That's why Babalu Aye, to a certain degree, went through it worse, because he just was stuck. He couldn't kill himself. He didn't know how, whatever it may be. So he had it rough because he had to stick it out.
So maybe I was interpreting it off. So maybe people who are, what's the word, crowned?
Mm-hmm. Or initiated,
initiated, they can endure.
Yeah, they're meant to endure.
Okay.
And they, another thing that's associated with Babalu Aye, unfortunately, is any type of skin condition due to leprosy. They may have a predisposition towards acne that needs to be treated. He's associated with measles, smallpox. Like, Babalu Aye in Nigeria isn't even kept in the house. He lives outside the house. And that was manifested in the 𝗃𝗲𝗍 of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁. Because what happened is Babalu Aye was looking for a place to live, and his friend 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃 had an extra room. So 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗃 had a beautiful daughter, and the daughter's name was 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗍𝗃, right, who is 𝘃𝗃's sister. So, Babalu Aye wasn't ugly. 𝗃𝗃𝗍𝗃 definitely wasn't. And every now and again, they'd walk past each other in the hall, and they'd stare at each other a little longer than usual or casual. And then out of nowhere, everybody's asleep, and they're having an entanglement, right, an affair.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem was 𝗃𝗍𝗃 didn't know that Babalu Aye had an affliction, which was the leprosy, because it hadn't developed to the point where it was noticeable. But, and you got yourself in nature's, wardrobe, it's going to come out, So this was a big issue now, because between the leprosy, and it says that in the specific Pataki, this is where syphilis first manifested. All of these things started ravaging 𝗃𝗍𝗃's body and her immune system, to the point where she started losing her hair. So she confectioned a wig. It's an 𝗃𝗲𝗍 that speaks of wigs as well, where they first manifested. And 𝗃𝗍𝗍 started noticing his daughter was off. He's like, "What's up with you? Like, you're off. You're acting weird. You're reserved. Like, is everything okay?" And she's like, "No, everything's fine." But her brother 𝘃𝗍𝗍, who was behind every door and watching everything, went up to 𝗃𝗍𝗍 and said, "Yo, this guy infected your daughter because you let him live here." 𝗃𝗍𝗍 flipped out. He beat the hell out of Babalu Aye, but he didn't kill him just because. But Babalu Aye went into the jungle. He ran into 𝘃𝗃𝗃, who didn't know what was happening. They were talking and fraternizing. Babalu Aye shacked up with 𝘃𝗃𝗃. And then 𝗃𝗃𝗃 one day walked by and said, "Bro, how are you going to allow this guy to live with you? Look what he did to our sister." 𝘃𝗃𝗃 beat the hell out of him. Kicked him out. And Babalu Aye said, "I'll never live in any..." I think it was 𝘃𝗃𝗃 that cursed him and said, "You'll never live in a house again." And that's why Babalu Aye lives outside, because you can't bring pestilence into the home. So there's certain quirks with him. There's certain processes with him that are going to deviate very much from the other Orishas.
This one's a complicated one, man.
Yeah, it's heavy. That's why, to be frank with you, and it's me talking about it because I was actually in communications with a gentleman who claimed to be Crown Direct. When I actually, was trying to manifest this encounter, I wasn't able to really communicate much. You try to find his children. They're so few and far between. Like, it got to the point where I just need to talk about this guy, because one of two things is occurring. Either they're so few, or they're so reserved they really don't want to talk about it periodically.
I was just about to say that. They did mention that they have their walls.
Yeah.
So maybe they're not just...
They just,
open.
Yeah, and I'll be frank with you, we're talking about, and this is not everybody, because I have a goddaughter that's a child of Babalu Aye that, she socializes perfectly, right? But you have others that really just don't interact on that level. Like, the social interactions are very difficult for them sometimes. So, and that could be a very spiritual in nature as well, where if they're not spiritually elevated enough to a certain point, their own spiritualities, because every child of Babalu Aye has an ex or transition spirit that was in this cult before. So every child of Babalu Aye has a spirit that lived that was a child of Babalu Aye as well. So it's like this cyclical thing where you're constantly trying to elevate, you know?
What are some of the colors? Because you mentioned that
Just
they
thinking about
had
that.
like velvet and other type of wardrobe. Now this is before the fall, I guess you can say.
Yeah, sure, because, you know, unfortunately when he became afflicted, you know, he was in rags, basically. And I believe that's known as 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 in Yoruba, and it's associated with him when the person is you know, covered in rags and things of that nature. But in Nigeria, he is his color is more like maroon or a wine almost. You know, but in Cuba it's the purple. So it's kind of on that same spectrum. In our, you know, manifestation, he's practically naked for the most part. He's bare chested, you know. You're going to see a satchel that he wears that's going to have the beans and things and grains that he used to clean himself, herbs of that nature. Over there, he looks like 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗃 basically in the marketplace. Like his head's wrapped, his face is wrapped, you know, to cover up and things like that. Mostly the same color profile. But you're going to see the dogs, you're going to see the parallels. And that's why San Lazaro or Babalu Aye became so popular, because he literally, you know, encompassed the archetype of Saint Lazarus. And that's why, I mean, from where I'm from in 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍, like the 16th of December going into the 17th, you know, East 4th in 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 and East 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 is like, it is bombarded. They have to shut down the whole avenue because it gets so packed that people, I mean, Oshun may be the patron Orisha of Cuba, being Our Lady of Charity, but I have to think the most adored Orisha, period, is Babalu Aye. You know, and he's definitely miraculous. He's somebody that everybody visits. Like the big thing with him is like the promise, you know, like make a promise, have a miracle happen, things like that. Like when you go into that little, it's a church. When you go in, you see like a wall full of like pendants, and you have like each of the pendants represents a miracle or like a promise that he's fulfilled. You see the people crawling or dragging themselves down the avenue to the church. Like they make like promises, like I'll drag myself from my house to the church if you do this for me, you know, things like that.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
You mentioned punishment earlier, and I wanted to ask you a question then, but we just kind of went around. When a Orisha punishes someone, do they punish them based off of what they went through? Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah, they can. Like, for example, because that's their energy. The reason they went through that in life is because that was the incarnation of the energy that they were manifesting. So when we're talking about the energy of sickness, hardship, poverty, you know, that's why he manifested that way, because that energy got recycled in nature in a way where it incarnated in said destiny or person, you know. So he punishes, and that's why I'm not a fan of making promises to the Orishas. I just kind of allow things to manifest, because this is like a deity where you make a promise and you don't fulfill. You're going to have serious issues. I'm going to actually put myself in a vulnerable space here. I'm going to tell, you know, what happens when you make a promise to this Orisha and you don't really fulfill. I made a promise that I wasn't going to cut my hair until I crowned Orisha to Babalu Aye, right? This was before I had Hand of Ifa.
Okay.
Right? So I had a certain hairstyle that didn't work with me.
Afro.
No, I ended up getting dreads, right? And I got tired of them after a while. And this was in high school, and I said, bro, I got to get rid of these because it's not working for me. You know what I'm saying? And I cut them. I cut them before time. And I'll be frank with you, brother. From like the age of 18 to like up until I did Orisha, oh, man, it was rough.
It was tough.
Yeah, it was rough. Like I moved to Miami. It really didn't have that much guidance. I moved back to Miami. I didn't have that much guidance. I started getting into the religion. You know, you're working, you're trying to study, you hate school. You know, it was hardship, you know what I'm saying? But I remember I got one of the first readings with my godfather, who I eventually obviously did Ifa with. And it's crazy because in the reading he said Babalu Aye is mad at the person who doesn't keep his promises.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. So me, once again, being all, you know, poetic and philosophical, I said, I promise not to cut my hair until I do Orisha now, just to make up for what I did. And I waited 5 years from that day, and I fulfilled. When I went to crown Orisha, the guy who, you know, ultimately cut my hair, he's like, dude, you got to pay me extra. There's too much here. You know what I'm saying? But he's, and even when I got, like, because I was Catholic, I got confirmed with his name. You know what I'm saying? So, like, when they confirmed me, it was under Lazarus. So it's somebody that, or an Orisha that I have a huge affinity for. And in my sign, he had an epic story, you know, and in my sign, it's one of the signs where he went from the land of Ife to 𝗏𝗲𝗍 and became king. You know, the manifestations within the 𝗃𝗏𝗃, you know, or the 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗃 spirituality of Vodou, ultimately, because he pertains to that, his archetype. So in my sign, it speaks very heavily of him.
So if you are getting punished by any of the Orishas, how do you get out of that?
It takes time. It's not just you do something and it goes away, because the thing about it is, with spiritual contagion, as I like to call it, you have gone against nature. It's not so much punishment, it's retribution.
Okay.
You've gone against nature while manifesting a certain energy, and because of it, you're going to get the repercussions of it. So there's usually not a traumatic event, depends on the degree though. You're going to have something noticeable happen. You're going to be, all right, I just got spanked. You could do the offerings, and then, but at the same time, you still have to come back from that, you know, because you get veered off so far. Even if you fix the tire over there, you still have to drive back to the highway to be able to get where you're going. So it takes time, you know, because the Orishas, they're like, all right, you gave the rooster, whatever, but I want to see how your conduct is. I want to see how you respond to said obstacle, you know. But
can you get punished by multiple Orishas?
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Like, people have odus where it's like, you know, 𝘄 and 𝗃𝗍𝗃. Like, let's say you're a child of the waters, or the two waters, as it's known. We spoke about it in the 𝗃𝗍𝗃 episode with 𝘃𝗶𝗱. They're going to punish you at the same time, because they bless you at the same time. Everything they do is in unison. So you could have issues with everybody. Like, I think when I was younger, there were times I did some things that were so random, I was getting it left. It's like when you walk home and everybody knows, like, your grandmother hits you, and then out of nowhere your aunt hops in, like, you know, the way it was old school. You get a family beat down. Your uncles get home and you're like, oh damn, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, with them, because you can do things that are so contrary to that which is naturally fluid, you're just gonna get it from everybody. And Babalu Aye is there's a story where Babalu Aye showed up at a drumming after he got sick, and when he got to the drumming, he started dancing, but, you know, he had his affliction, so he was all like, imagine Elaine dancing on the Seinfeld episode times 100.
Yeah.
So, you know, he was trying to dance on his crutches and whatnot, and he fell. So everybody started, you know, they started ragging on him, like, look at you, you know. They laughed at him, they jeered at him. He opened his mouth and let go of the plague, and he literally infected all the Orishas. Everybody was sick. Everybody was going to die, except 𝗏𝗏𝗿𝗏. So 𝗏𝗏𝗿𝗏 calls Babalu Aye forward and says, bro, what are you trying to do, the apocalypse? He said, no, they made fun of me. He said, of course they made fun of you. You slept with this woman. You did this to yourself. You're dancing. You don't really have those capabilities. You need to accept your situation to a certain degree. This is part of your process. And he's like, well, you know, I don't want them to make fun of me no more. He says, believe me, you're not even going to be invited to the drumming no more. And when you come through, everybody might leave. He took the curse off, and from that day forward, everybody, you know, left him alone. You know, it's crazy because Babalu Aye, within the Lukumi tradition, is seen as one of the Orishas that can go into any body. You know, like, if I was not a Babalawo and I'm crowned Oshun, like, Oshun is the one that can kind of mount me or go through my body or cause me to go into trance, right? Babalu Aye is the only Orisha that no matter who you have initiated in, he can manifest through your body, because everybody can get sick. So that molecule's there.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he really has dominion over everybody, because at the end of the day, sickness can affect any head. So therefore, he's able to, you know, be transient through each of them.
If that's the case, can two Orishas, I'm not going to say the word fight each other inside someone, but can you have conflicting, I guess, not ideologies, but you said that, you know, he would manifest in somebody by being sick, but what if you're initiated as another Orisha, and then he comes in, is there some sort of internal struggle there?
No, because they bow down to him.
Oh.
That's the thing. This guy is, I mean, it's not about ranks. Like the Orishas are beyond that. But you have certain Orishas that are in a class where it's like, just leave them alone. Like, just whatever they want to do, just do. One of them is 𝘃𝗵𝗄 or 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗲, because 𝗃𝗲𝗿 he's everywhere. He's everything. Nothing works without him. But Babalu Aye is so feared. Whatever he wants to do, but like let's say right now within me, Oshun is there. She moves a little to the side if he wants to come through.
Oh man, this reminds you of the movie Osmosis Jones. Remember
Man,
Lawrence
that was a while
Fishburne
ago,
was
yeah.
the virus
Yeah.
inside.
It was like that. He's the mucus. Yeah, he's Babalu Aye is all of that, you know. So when you look at that and you see those concepts, you begin to understand the magnitude of the energy, you know.
So if somebody is initiated in Babalu Aye, we're not saying that it's bad, right?
No, God, no.
Okay.
It's a blessing. It really is.
Okay.
Because it's so exclusive, you know.
So how does somebody, I guess, embrace that or celebrate that, or because based from what you're telling me, it doesn't. I'll be honest with you, man.
Yeah, it's scary.
It sounds like I don't want this guy to be a part of me. He gets me sick.
Yeah.
You know, have kids being sick.
Yeah.
Why would I want him? Why would I want that Orisha to be? Why would I want to be associated with him?
Yeah, of course.
So please, like.
No, I mean, you gotta. I don't know if you necessarily have to crown him or initiate into his mysteries, but you need to see where he failed.
Okay.
If like I think I only have one godchild that has this Orisha out of nearly 100 that I've formally given hand of Ifas. I would tell them the same way I told her. Be careful with his failures. Don't walk that path. Avoid the promiscuity. Avoid the instability. Take care of your health. Make it a priority. Stabilize your life. All these different things, But from a positive aspect, Babalu Aye had really great moments as well. Like if he liked you, if you're somebody that was humble, if you're somebody that was deserving, he was very magnanimous in that regard. Like if you look at the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗄, Oshun was a medium, a spiritual medium. She was a child of Egun. Like she would come into trance and things like that. And one day she consulted a man named 𝘃𝗶𝗿𝗁, who's the Orisha of the herbs and the witch doctor, right? 𝘃𝗶𝗿𝗁 fell in love with her, and he was trying to take advantage of her. And she's like, hey, I'm not interested in you like that. Get out of my house. But 𝘃𝗶𝗿𝗁, being horrible, left witchcraft in her home, and it caused her to go blind. Days go by, no one sees this woman. And mind you, she's like the head, like spiritual, woman. She's like the 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗲 of that, village. So they thought she was dead or whatever. So the guy who was like the coroner, undertaker of the town was Babalu Aye. So he went to actually go collect the body. But he realized, holy crap, this woman's alive. Now, mind you, her conditions at that point were horrible. Hadn't bathed, this, that, and the third. She lost her sight. And he said, what happened to you? She said, I consulted that guy. He left. I lost my eyesight. I've basically been here dying for the past like 2 days, whatever, 3 days. I need help. And he's like, well, let's get you bathed. Let's, all these other things, and he did so respectfully. He helped her, achieve those conditions. And he took her to Orula, or his godfather's house. And when they consulted her, she came with the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗄, right? Where Ifa says she had been a victim of witchcraft, and the darkness, which actually was born, or the absence of light or blindness was born in 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗄, had befallen her. So, he said, you need this, this, and this. Babalu Aye said, I'll take care of all costs, I'll help her. And they performed the ebo, but it came out that she had to initiate into Orisha. And the people that were going to help her get there was Orunmila and Babalu Aye. So she received her hand of Ifa, she did previous ceremony, and then they took her into the room. And her eyesight came back. When this occurred, her and Babalu Aye kept a friendship going, and they eventually actually started a relationship and got together. You know what I'm saying? So it's him in a positive light, Mind you, it's really crazy. Like, you go to a cemetery, you see the guy digging the hole. You're like, and he might be the most wonderful guy on earth, but you're digging a hole to put somebody that's transitioned in it. There's this automatic, like, oh God,
ick factor.
Or you got the guy that, is a mortician. He handles people that have transitioned all day. You're like, I don't want to hang out with that guy. And that's horrible because that's like your first impression. Like you're thinking death. Maybe there's death on him. Maybe like all this ignorance. You know what I'm saying? And Babalu Aye was a victim of that because he fulfilled all those roles. He was the guy who drove the funeral car. He's the guy that processes the body. He's the guy who buries the person. But then you see these stories of miraculousness and charity and love, you know. So there's a really positive aspect to him as well. I love him. Like Babalu Aye, like you know what I'm saying? I won't say, well, I've had conflicts. I've had wars. I've had situations, you know. I'll never forget, and this is pretty personal, man. But I remember the worst year of my life up until this point has been the year my grandmother died, right? And I'll never forget that year. At the beginning of that year, I came with the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗃, right? Which is where Babalu Aye, there's two stories there, but one of them was Babalu Aye had gotten kicked out of where he was, and his brother 𝗃𝗺𝗃 had conquered a land, which was the land of 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗄. And if you look at Woman King, who were the greatest enemies of 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗄? The people of Oyo, right? And 𝗃𝗺 was the king of Oyo.
Oh.
So I don't know. They might have gotten something from that 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗍𝗻𝗄. So when 𝗃𝗺 sees that his brother's really not doing anything with his life, he's like, yo, I love you. I have other lands to conquer. I got to go. But I want to leave you as the king of these people. And if you come with the leopard skin, which was the sign of the royal, like you talk about colors and diagrams, in that sign, he dressed in leopard skin. You know what I'm saying? And when he arrived in the town, the people respected him as if he was 𝗃𝗺 because of the way he was dressed and the way he was pedigreed. And he stayed king there. And when 𝗃𝗺 finished his other wars, he went back and, you know, he tried to not necessarily take the kingdom back from his brother, but he wanted to see, you know, were people happy, were people not? And people said, no, you please leave him. He's amazing. We love him, you know? And that's when, you know, 𝗃𝗺 gave Babalu Aye a kingdom, right? Even when he didn't believe in himself. So where does this tie in with my grandmother? I come with 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗃. My grandmother had situations where her heart and her kidneys were fighting each other. She had congested heart failure. That medication affects the kidneys.
So she was all swollen.
Yeah, so they had her on
dialysis.
No, not dialysis. God, I don't remember the
water pill.
A diuretic, yes, sir. And she was on Coumadin, a blood thinner, like a bunch of things. She was 85 when this started, and 86 when she transitioned. So that's happening. Things just start escalating quickly, and it ultimately ended with her passing on December 30th of that year. You know what I'm saying? And the crazy thing about it is my grandmother was a daughter of 𝗃𝗺. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And who defended me that year was Babalu Aye.
Okay.
And the crazy thing was the prophecy was 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗃 Babalu Aye, which means a blessing of position or kingship by way of Babalu Aye. So when I looked at the dynamic after I'm going through like this depression and I'm trying to get over the worst pain I've ever felt, you know what I'm saying? Because I didn't understand what pain was until my grandmother died. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm looking at the pataki after the funeral, because at that point I'm so distraught, I just want to read. And I'm looking at it, I said, this is what it's talking about. Babalu Aye, or me, arrived. 𝗃𝗺, my grandmother, said, hey, I have to leave. I'm leaving you with the kingdom now. And it was just like that, because when she died, it's crazy, bro, because I'm only 31. I became the patriarch of my family because she was the matriarch of our family. You know what I'm saying? So those are the kind of experiences I've had with this Orisha, and I was able to avoid a very debilitating depression based on the example that this man provided. You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't want his brother to leave. He didn't feel like he was ready. And to be frank with you, when my grandmother died, I didn't feel like I was ready. Yeah. And in situations like that, either you're going to crumble or you're going to assume. And because of Babalu Aye, I was able to assume.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, forgive me.
No, it's fine. We can, we can cut this part if we have to. But you don't ever say the word die.
I don't feel like we die.
How come?
Because death is only the beginning. No.
How many movies said that?
Shout out to the movie, The Mummy, yo. But I don't feel like we die because there's still energy there. I feel like death is like when a light bulb bursts out, or I feel like death is for things that aren't alive. To die means you never were alive, because when there's life in something, whether it's a human being, a soul, an idea, a movement, those things never die. They transition. Like, so for example, right? They say great men never see their dreams realized while they're alive, right? Or they're here. But even when they die, what happens? That movement, if it really has life within it, transitions. Someone else will carry on the flame. I feel ultimately, even though I feel like Ifa personally isn't moving in the most corrective directions, I don't think it will ever die. I just feel like we need to be careful that we don't take it so far off track that it's going to take us generations to get back on track and progress, you know? And if we're not careful, I think with this specific, phase that we're going through, it could get there, because I feel like people are focusing more on the material aspect of it, the novelty aspect of it, rather than what Ifa is trying to provide, which is wisdom and guidance.
Interesting. I noticed that you say transition. That's the word.
And I gotta attribute that to my elders, because the men that trained me taught me to speak in a way where it was never detrimental. So, for example, if I'm performing a consultation for someone, I never say, "Hey, you're gonna die," because within that cipher, I like to call it, within that space, that circle, anything the Babalawo says will happen. So I can't say you're going to die, or you guys are going to get divorced, or anything negative. I have to say, be careful with transitioning this year in any way. Be careful with a lack of communication that could cause you guys to separate. So I stay away from words like that, because I do believe there is energy in what we express. The 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 says it. So when you hear me speak in a way of transition, or I'm a little resistant to certain words, because those words are present in the English language. When you look at old world language, certain words don't even encompass certain concepts, So that's really where it comes from. The way I was trained was very old world. I won't even say old school, because it was probably before school. You know what I'm saying? These guys were crazy. They were different.
All right.
So, with Babalu Aye, guys, we were able to delve into quite a bit. I know it's going to generate a lot of questions.
Interesting cat there, yeah.
Oh, man, you got to love him, As far as closing thoughts on him, learn from him. When you talk about somebody that was able to have the confidence to present themselves in such a vulnerable way for other people's betterment so that they avoid the same mistakes, it's nothing short of honorable, So, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁. Another thing, Lucille Ball's husband, Desi Arnaz, they say he was initiated into this deity.
Really?
Very, very, very devout. Like, Lucy, I'm home.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a musician, and they say he was very, very dedicated to this deity. So either he was initiated in it, or he was just a real advocate. So nice little fun fact. But couple closing thoughts. BotanicaCandlesandMore.com is up and running for services as well as products. The podcast has gone over the 10K download mark on all major platforms.
Yeah. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. I think Amazon too. So
humbling,
you can tell Alexa to play Our Roots podcast.
Tell her.
Yeah.
There's that. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Big thanks from Our Roots podcast. And until next time, see the light.